Under the scorching heat of the Montana wilderness, a woman was tied to the base of a tree, alone and utterly exhausted. In the distance, a massive grizzly bear was approaching. And then the unthinkable happened. Could a wild creature you once saved remember you? Could it return to save your life? Today I'm going to tell you a true story, one that leaves everyone who hears it filled with wonder and in tears. Join me on this journey from the misty mornings over Portland's skyline to the unforgiving forests of Montana, where one courageous decision changed everything. Emily Parker once lived in a small apartment overlooking Portland's Willamette River. Every morning as sunlight pierced through the fog and reflected off the glass windows of the city's buildings, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life she had, a stable job at the Portland Fire Department, kind colleagues, lazy weekend hikes, and those spontaneous road trips along the Oregon coast. But then, in the midst of those seemingly perfect days, a question began to echo in her mind. Am I really making a difference in this world the way I once dreamed I would? From a young age, Emily had a special passion for wild animals. Not because they were beautiful or rare, but because she believed that every creature deserved protection from quietly fading away. Working as a city firefighter gave her the chance to save lives, yes, but over time, she realized she was always confined to urban emergencies. She didn't want to just be a responder. She wanted to be a guardian. And then a college friend sent her a posting. The Montana Wildlife Service was looking for firefighters with wilderness training to join their wildlife conservation team. Emily didn't hesitate. She applied, and just a few months later, she landed in Montana. Her family objected. Her colleagues were confused. Everyone asked her the same question. Why would you give up a perfect career to go somewhere so dangerous and remote? Emily just smiled. Because my heart doesn't live here anymore. What made Emily's story remarkable wasn't a single moment of so-called bravery. It was a lonely, repeated choice she made day after day. Waking up to freezing mornings in the wilderness, facing a black bear that had wandered too close to camp, seeing animal tracks, illegal traps, blood, and the faint, ragged breaths of a dying creature. Not everyone is born to live an unusual life. But sometimes those who dare to leave their comfort zone are the ones who bring about the most profound change. And you don't have to travel all the way to Montana to create that change. Sometimes it all begins with listening to your own heart. Honestly, it was that very heart that led Emily to a strange and wild place. No streetlights, no reliable cell signal, just wind, pine trees, the unblinking eyes of wild creatures, and her first challenge she never saw coming. That's when Emily learned her first harsh lesson, and it's also when she made her first devastating mistake. The Bitterroot National Forest was unlike any place Emily had ever known. By day, the sun filtered through towering pines, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor as temperatures soared in the summer heat. The ground crackled underfoot, dry pine needles and brittle twigs snapping with every step, while the scent of resin hung heavy in the air. By night, the temperature dropped sharply, and the wind carried the haunting calls of owls mixed with the occasional distant grunt of moose or elk. In that vast, untamed silence, even your breath felt cautious. And yet, within that fierce beauty, Emily felt something raw, something alive. For the first time in her life, she truly felt present. But in her very first week, Emily made a mistake, one that almost came at a devastating cost. That morning, she and her team had been assigned to survey the Eastern Ridge, an area marked by signs of recent fire damage and possible illegal activity. When they reached a fork in the path, Emily spotted a mother deer and her fawn darting across a distant clearing. She got curious and made a choice. She stepped away from the group for just a few minutes to capture a photo without telling anyone. It only took 5 minutes and everything changed. The wind shifted, fog rolled in suddenly. And in that moment, Emily realized she was lost. No GPS signal, no radio reception, no trail markers. Just one woman standing among endless trees with no sense of direction. Luckily, the patrol team picked up her signal through a backup emergency beacon and found her about an hour later. But that moment, that sinking feeling of being completely alone with nothing but nature and your instinct to rely on, was etched into her memory for the rest of her life. A few months ago, a junior ranger was severely injured when he stepped into an illegal animal trap. While out alone, her supervisor explained later. He survived, but ever since that day, no one takes a single rule lightly. Young newcomers to the wild often make the same classic mistakes. They believe they can handle situations like they read in training manuals. They underestimate the vastness of the wilderness and mistake wild nature as simply beautiful instead of dangerous. Emily was no exception, but she was luckier than most because she walked away with a lesson burned into her mind. In the wild, uncontrolled curiosity can cost you your life. One morning, Emily received her first solo patrol assignment. Her very first time alone after nearly 3 months of training and supervision. She packed carefully: water, map, communication gear, and self-defense tools. The sun was already fierce, but her mind was steady. She felt ready. No one, not even Emily, could have imagined that this patrol would change everything. That just a few hours later, she'd be tied to a tree in the middle of the wilderness facing the greatest danger of her life. What happened? And how could a creature once thought to be wild become her savior? We'll uncover that in a moment. But first, why not pause, take a deep breath, and get ready for what comes next? Because this story is only just beginning. That morning, the sky was crystal clear, not a single cloud in sight. The sun was already scorching by 7 a.m., that fierce, searing light only a midsummer day could produce. Emily sat behind the wheel of an old Forest Service truck, her hands loosely gripping the steering wheel, a worn Ranger hat on her head. Instead of soft music or a radio voice, there was only the sound of the wind through pine branches and the crunch of tires grinding over thick forest roads. This was Emily's first solo patrol. One of her teammates had come down with a sudden fever and couldn't take the shift. After weeks of observing, note-taking, and shadowing patrol teams, Emily was finally cleared for a simple route, an area with no recent signs of suspicious activity. She wasn't worried. In fact, she was a little excited. But just 1 hour after leaving base, Emily spotted something strange. A dark pickup truck half hidden among tall pines in a spot that wasn't on any official patrol or conservation route. No license plate visible, and the closer she got, the more uneasy she felt. She stopped her vehicle, lifted her binoculars, and raised her hand in a signal as the truck began to move slowly. She stepped forward, firm but non-threatening. 2 men climbed out, silent, no resistance, no words. Emily calmly asked to check the back of the truck, and then her heart nearly stopped. Inside was a fully grown American bison, shackled tightly at all 4 legs. Its eyes were wide with terror, breath shallow and quick. Sweat glistened across its thick hide. A bleeding wound marked its left flank. Emily didn't need any more proof. She knew instantly this was an illegal capture, likely for the black market trade in exotic game. She turned, bolting back toward her vehicle, but before she could even radio for backup, everything went blurry. The 2 men grabbed her, locked her arms, and minutes later, Emily was tied to a massive pine tree deep in the forest, a place where no one could hear her cry for help. Under the scorching sun, sweat rolled down her face. The rough bark dug into her back. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Her eyes started to blur. But the worst part wasn't the heat, wasn't the fear of being left behind. It was a helplessness, knowing that right now, a rare creature was being taken away, possibly to be killed for some wealthy collector's trophy room, and might never roam free again. Bison poaching in protected areas remains one of America's most troubling wildlife crimes. According to the Wildlife Conservation Society, the illegal trade in protected species generates billions annually. The poachers are organized, heavily backed, and well-equipped. And Emily, alone in the wild, was just a woman tied to a tree with her hopes slowly slipping away. But then, just when everything seemed on the verge of ending, something extraordinary happened. A deep, rumbling growl, not far away. Emily opened her eyes. From behind the tall pines, a massive grizzly bear emerged, eyes sharp, movement slow but deliberate. It didn't charge. It didn't stand on hind legs in threat. It simply approached, circles around her, and then stopped just feet away. Emily held her breath. Her heart thundered in her chest. And then she recognized it. Something so familiar. That scar running down its right shoulder, those intelligent eyes. It was him. the bear she had once saved almost a year ago. Sometimes in nature, where instinct rules, it is kindness that forms the strongest bond. We often assume animals don't feel gratitude, but maybe they simply choose to remember what is true and what is deep. And in that moment, Emily's life changed forever. A creature she once saved had come back to save her. The grizzly stood there, steadfast as a guardian amidst the tall pines and the scorching sun. His fur shimmered gold and brown in the sunlight, eyes wild yet somehow knowing. Emily didn't move, not out of fear, but because she sensed something sacred was unfolding. A year ago, on a misty morning when she was still a new volunteer, Emily had discovered a severely injured grizzly in a prohibited hunting zone. One of its legs was caught in an illegal trap, blood staining the forest floor, eyes filled with panic and pain. The wildlife team suggested tranquilizing it immediately. The risk of approaching a wounded wild bear was too great. But Emily couldn't walk away. She stayed, sat there for hours at a safe distance, just talking softly, whistling patiently. 3 days later, with Emily's gentle approach, the rescue team managed to sedate the bear and free it. 3 months later, after rehabilitation at the wildlife center, it fully recovered but never wandered far from the territory near the ranger station. It lingered like a free and silent spirit. No one, not even Emily, ever thought it would remember. And now, that very bear was pushing its massive snout against the ropes binding her hands, teeth carefully working at the fibers. Slowly, patiently. Each time its breath touched her skin, Emily swallowed back tears of emotion. Studies from wildlife biologists have shown that bears possess highly developed long-term memories, especially when linked to survival experiences or intense emotions. In the animal kingdom, memory isn't just a human concept. It's tied to scent, gaze, rhythm, sound, and sometimes a sense of safety. Finally, the rope snapped. Emily collapsed onto the forest floor, trembling, but her eyes sparkled with determination. The bear stepped back, watching her carefully. We often believe that wilderness means only danger, but in the wildest places, under the harshest conditions, it is connection, those small, silent acts of kindness that endure the longest. Emily stood up, her body scratched and bruised. She looked at the bear as if to say, "Thank you." Then she ran back toward the Forest Service truck, hands shaking as she turned on the radio, urgently calling the ranger station. When the signal came through, Emily's voice was trembling but clear. "There's a wildlife crime in progress. A bison is being transported illegally. Send backup immediately." Within 40 minutes, local rangers and wildlife officers arrived. Emily led the team, tracking the tire marks still visible in the soft earth. The forest's natural canopy had protected the ground from drying too quickly, preserving the hurried traces of the criminals. Just a few hours later, the two poachers were apprehended as they attempted to cross the forest boundary near Highway 93. They didn't resist, because justice this time didn't come alone. It came with faith, respect, and a bear who remembered. The truck was stopped at the edge of the forest, just a few hundred meters from the park boundary. Rangers closed in, sirens wailed, piercing through a space once filled only with the sounds of birds and wind. The two poachers were handcuffed and taken into custody, and the bison, collapsed in the truck bed, eyes half closed, was lowered down gently with special equipment and care. The wounds weren't too serious, but the panic, that was undeniable in every trembling breath, every small shake of the head as the wildlife veterinarian approached. Emily sat nearby, saying nothing. She knew the animal needed time, just like she did, to return to peace. 3 days later, on a quiet afternoon, the conservation team brought the bison back to the open meadows near Salmon Lake, the place that had once roamed free. Emily walked behind, carrying monitoring equipment, a little water, and a gaze that never left its back. When the transport gate opened, the bison stood still for a moment. Then it stepped into the sunlight, slowly, one step at a time. Free. That night, Emily returned to her small wooden cabin on the edge of the reserve. The house had just 2 rooms, a corrugated metal roof, rough timber walls, and a small table by the window where she often wrote in her journal at night. She brewed a cup of coffee, sat down, and began to write. "Today I witnessed 2 things I thought were impossible. A bear turned back to save a human, and a bison who was never supposed to get a second chance walked free. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I do know this. What we give with all our heart will always come back in some way. Maybe in a look, a scar, or a soft grunt in the blazing heat of a summer noon. In the wild, where instinct rules, there's still space for gratitude, for memory, for quiet sacrifice. And in this journey to protect life, the small things we do today may be the very reason a species survives tomorrow. Emily closed her notebook. Outside the window, night had fallen. In the distance, a silhouette of a large animal moved among the tall pines. She smiled, not afraid, just grateful. If you're still here, thank you for walking this path with us. If this story stirred something in you, leave a comment about what respect for wildlife means to you. Have you ever had a moment where you connected with an animal in an unexpected way? We'd love to hear your stories of woodland encounters and moments of understanding between different species. And if you believe that the work of wildlife firefighters and conservation officers deserves more recognition, share this story with someone you know would appreciate it. These unsung heroes risk their lives not just for our forests, but for every creature that calls those forests home. Because sometimes the greatest forms of respect come not from those who have the power to destroy, but from those who choose to protect. And sometimes the animals we save end up saving us in ways we never imagined possible. Maybe there's a lesson here for all of us about remembering kindness, returning compassion, and recognizing that the wilderness isn't something to be feared or conquered, but something to be honored and preserved. So tell us in the comments, what small act of conservation or kindness will you commit to today? Because just like Emily discovered in that forest, the smallest actions can create the strongest bonds, and what we give to this world often comes back to us in the most unexpected, beautiful ways.